The letter arrived at the Julesburg, Colorado station with a crude stamp across its envelope that read "Refused" in black ink. And inside that letter was a woman who had traveled 1,800 miles only to be rejected before she ever stepped foot in her intended's home. It was late September 1876, and the afternoon sun beat down on the wooden platform where Reagan Lambert stood with her single trunk beside her, clutching that returned letter in trembling hands. She had spent every penny she owned on the train fare from Philadelphia, answering an advertisement from a rancher named Thomas Whitmore, who claimed he needed a practical wife to help manage his household. The correspondence had been brief but promising, or so she had thought. 3 letters exchanged, a photograph sent, and an agreement made. She had sold her mother's china, the last valuable thing she possessed after her parents died within months of each other from fever, and boarded a train westward with hope burning in her chest like a small, persistent flame. That flame guttered out when the station master handed her the letter that morning, explaining that Mr. Whitmore's hired man had come to town specifically to return it unopened, along with a terse message that his employer had since decided to marry a widow from Denver with an established ranch of her own. Reagan was not needed. The money for her return journey was not included. She stood there on that platform, 22 years old, with $7 to her name and nowhere to go. The station master had already turned away, uncomfortable with her predicament and unwilling to involve himself further. A few townspeople passed by, their curious glances sliding over her travel-worn dress and the obvious distress she was trying to hide behind a carefully blank expression. Shame burned in her throat. She had been so foolish, trusting a stranger, believing that desperation could be transformed into opportunity through sheer will alone. "Miss, you cannot stay here." The station master returned, his voice not unkind but firm. "The evening train comes through in an hour, and you are blocking the platform." "I have nowhere to go," Reagan said quietly, fighting to keep her voice steady. "That is not my concern. Perhaps the boarding house might extend you credit, though I doubt it." He walked away again, leaving her standing there with the weight of her failure pressing down on her shoulders. She picked up one end of her trunk, trying to drag it toward the edge of the platform. It was too heavy. Everything she owned was in that trunk, every dress, every book, every small memento of a life that no longer existed. She had no family left, no friends in this territory, no prospects of any kind. The boarding house would not take her without payment. She could perhaps find work, but what kind? Julesburg was a small railroad town, rough around the edges, with more saloons than churches and more men than women. The kind of work available to a woman alone was not work she could bear to consider. "I will take that letter." The voice came from behind her, deep and steady. Reagan turned to find a man standing a few feet away, his hat in his hands. He was tall, with sun-darkened skin and dark brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. His clothes were dusty from travel, worn but clean, and his eyes were a striking blue-gray that reminded her of winter skies. He looked to be perhaps 25 or 26, with a strong jaw and a serious expression that softened slightly as he met her gaze. "Excuse me," Reagan said, not understanding. "The letter. The arrangement. I am saying I will honor it if you are willing." He spoke carefully, as though he had rehearsed these words. "My name is Nathan Irving. I have a ranch about 12 miles north of here. I came to town for supplies and overheard the station master talking about your situation." Reagan stared at him, trying to process what he was offering. "You want to marry me. You do not even know me. You came all this way expecting to marry a man you did not know," Nathan pointed out, his voice gentle. "The situation has not changed except for the man. I know that sounds presumptuous, but I am trying to help. If you have no other options, I can offer you a home in my name. I will not force anything on you. We can have an arrangement, a practical one, if that suits you better." She should have been wary. Every sensible part of her warned against trading one stranger for another. But Nathan Irving's eyes were honest, and there was something in his manner that suggested decency rather than opportunism. She had come west to marry a stranger. At least this stranger was offering her a choice. "Why would you do this?" Reagan asked. "You could place an advertisement yourself, find someone more suitable." Nathan shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "I did place an advertisement 6 months ago. No one answered." "I think women are less inclined to answer ads from small ranchers when they can aim for cattle barons or town merchants. I am not a rich man, Miss Lambert. I have land and livestock and a house that needs considerable work, but I am honest and I pay my debts. I could use help on the ranch, and you need somewhere to be. It seems like we might be able to help each other." The practical nature of his offer appealed to her. There was no false romance in his words, no grand promises he might not keep. Just honesty and a straightforward proposal born of mutual need. "I should tell you that I know very little about ranch work," Reagan said slowly. "I can cook and clean and manage a household budget. I can read and write and do figures, but I have never been on a ranch in my life." "I can teach you what you need to know," Nathan replied, "if you are willing to learn." Reagan looked down at the letter in her hand, that cruel refused stamp mocking her. Then she looked back at Nathan Irving, this unexpected stranger offering her a lifeline. She had already traveled 1,800 miles on faith. Perhaps she could travel 12 more. "All right," she said quietly. "I accept your offer, Mr. Irving." Something shifted in Nathan's expression, relief mixed with what might have been nervousness. "Call me Nathan. If we are to be married, we should at least use given names." "Reagan," she replied. He nodded and picked up her trunk as though it weighed nothing, hoisting it onto his shoulder. "I have a wagon just down the street. We can go to the church now if you are ready, or we can wait until tomorrow if you need time to think on it more." Reagan considered. If she waited, she would need somewhere to stay tonight, and she had no money for that. More than that, if she waited, she might lose her nerve entirely. Better to move forward while she still had the courage. "Now," she said. "I would like to do it now." They were married an hour later in the small wooden church at the edge of town. The reverend was a thin man with wire spectacles who asked no questions about the hasty union, perhaps accustomed to the practical marriages that frontier life required. There were no flowers, no music, no guests. Just two strangers speaking vows in front of a minister, while the late afternoon light slanted through the dusty windows. Nathan's voice was steady as he promised to honor and cherish her. Reagan's voice shook only slightly as she made the same promises, binding herself to this man she did not know. When the reverend pronounced them married, Nathan did not kiss her. He simply offered his arm and she took it, and they walked out of the church as husband and wife. The wagon ride to Nathan's ranch took nearly 2 hours on rutted roads that wound through scrubland dotted with sage and prairie grass. Nathan drove in silence for the first mile, and Reagan sat beside him, her hands folded in her lap, trying not to think about what she had just done. The landscape was so different from Philadelphia, so vast and empty. The sky seemed to stretch forever in every direction, unmarred by buildings or trees, just endless blue fading to gold as the sun sank lower. "Tell me about your family," Nathan said finally, breaking the silence. "The station master mentioned you came from Pennsylvania." "Philadelphia," Reagan confirmed. "My father was a school teacher. My mother managed our household. They both died last year within 3 months of each other. There was no other family. I stayed as long as I could, working as a seamstress, but the rent was too high and the work too scarce. When I saw Mr. Whitmore's advertisement, it seemed like a solution. "I am sorry about your parents," Nathan said, and he sounded like he meant it. "Thank you. What about you?" "Have you always been a rancher?" Nathan shook his head. "My father was a saddle maker in Missouri. I learned the trade from him, but after he died, my mother remarried a man who made it clear I was not welcome. I was 18, old enough to make my own way. I came west, worked on various ranches for a few years, saved my money and bought my own land 3 years ago. It is not much yet, but it is mine." There was pride in his voice when he said that last part, and Reagan understood it. Ownership meant something out here, meant independence and security in a way it never had back east where everything was already claimed and divided. "You have any help on your ranch?" Reagan asked. "I hire men during roundup and branding, but day to day, it is just me. I have about 200 head of cattle, some horses, chickens, a milk cow. The house is small, 2 rooms, but it is solid. I built it myself." He glanced at her. "I know it is not what you might have expected." "I expected nothing," Reagan said honestly. "Mr. Whitmore told me very little about his situation. I think he preferred to keep things vague." "He did you no favors," Nathan said, a hint of anger in his voice. "Bringing you all this way and then refusing to honor his word. That is no way to treat anyone." Reagan appreciated his indignation on her behalf, even if it changed nothing about her circumstances. "Well, it led to this, so perhaps it will turn out for the best." Nathan looked at her again, something warm in his expression. "I will do my best to make sure it does." The ranch came into view as the sun touched the horizon, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. It was indeed small, just a wooden house with a covered porch, a barn, a chicken coop, and several corrals. But it looked sturdy and well-maintained, and there was something appealing about its isolation, the way it sat against the landscape as though it had grown there naturally. Nathan helped her down from the wagon and carried her trunk inside. The house was dim and smelled faintly of wood smoke and coffee. He lit a lamp, and Reagan looked around what was to be her new home. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a cast iron stove in one corner, a rough wooden table with 2 chairs, and a few shelves lined with supplies. A door in the back wall presumably led to the bedroom. "It is not much," Nathan said again, watching her face. "It is fine," Reagan replied, and she meant it. She had expected much worse. At least it was clean. "Where will I sleep?" Nathan's ears reddened slightly. "The bedroom is yours." "I will sleep out here. I have blankets and the floor is comfortable enough. I do not expect anything from you, Reagan. I meant what I said about this being practical. You can have your own space." Relief washed through her, though she was not entirely sure why. Nathan had been nothing but respectful, but the reality of being married to a stranger was beginning to settle in, and she was grateful for his consideration. "Thank you," she said quietly. He showed her the bedroom, which contained a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk at the foot of the bed. "I will bring in your things. There is water in the pitcher if you want to wash up. I am sure you are tired from your journey." Reagan was exhausted, physically and emotionally, but she was also hungry and unsure of the proper protocol. "Should I make supper?" "Do not worry about that tonight. I have some bread and cold beef left from yesterday. That will do." Nathan left her alone in the bedroom, and she sank down onto the bed, pressing her hands to her face. What had she done? Married a stranger, agreed to live in the middle of nowhere with a man she had known for less than 3 hours. It was madness. And yet, what choice had she had? Nathan seemed kind. That was more than many women could say about their husbands, arranged match or not. She washed her face and hands in the basin, changed out of her traveling dress into something simpler, and returned to the main room. Nathan had set out the promised bread and beef on the table, along with 2 cups of water. They ate in awkward silence, the scrape of knives against plates the only sound. "I usually rise before dawn," Nathan said finally. "I will try to be quiet so I do not wake you." "You can sleep as late as you like tomorrow. Get your bearings." "I am used to rising early," Reagan replied. "I can help with the morning chores. If you want to, there is no pressure." He paused. "I know this is all very strange. I do not expect you to settle in overnight." "It is strange," Reagan agreed. "But I appreciate your honesty and your help. I would have been in a very difficult situation if you had not spoken up." Nathan met her eyes across the table. "I could not just leave you there. It would not have been right." They finished eating, and Reagan insisted on washing the dishes despite Nathan's protests. It felt good to have something to do with her hands, some normal task to ground her. Nathan banked the fire in the stove and brought in his bedroll, spreading it out near the far wall. "Good night, Reagan," he said softly. "Good night, Nathan." She retreated to the bedroom and closed the door, leaning against it for a moment. Through the thin wall, she could hear Nathan moving around, settling in for the night. She climbed into bed fully clothed except for her shoes, pulling the rough wool blanket up to her chin. The mattress was lumpy but not uncomfortable, and the sheets smelled like lye soap and sunshine. Reagan lay awake for a long time, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night. The wind against the walls, the distant lowing of cattle, the creak of the house settling. She thought about her parents, about the life she had left behind, about Thomas Whitmore and his casual cruelty. She thought about Nathan Irving, this stranger who was now her husband, sleeping on the floor in the next room. Eventually, exhaustion won out over anxiety, and she slept. She woke to the smell of coffee and the gray light of pre-dawn. For a moment she forgot where she was, and then it all came rushing back. The ranch. The marriage. Nathan. She rose quickly, splashing water on her face and twisting her long brown hair into a simple bun. When she emerged from the bedroom, Nathan was at the stove, frying eggs in a cast-iron skillet. "Good morning," he said, looking surprised to see her. "I thought you would sleep longer." "I told you I was used to early mornings." Reagan tied an apron around her waist. "What can I do? You can sit and have coffee," Nathan said. "I am almost done here." But Reagan moved to the table and began slicing bread, finding butter in the larder and setting the table properly. Nathan watched her with an expression she could not quite read, something between gratitude and confusion, as though he was not used to anyone helping him. They ate breakfast together as the sun rose, painting the windows gold. Nathan told her about the ranch, about the work that needed doing, about the rhythms of life out here. Reagan listened carefully, trying to memorize everything. After they ate, Nathan headed out to tend the animals, and Reagan set about exploring her new home more thoroughly. The house was indeed small and sparse, but it was clean and well built. The supplies on the shelves were basic but adequate. She found flour, cornmeal, dried beans, salt pork, coffee, sugar, and a few cans of preserved goods. The dishes were mismatched but serviceable. There were no curtains on the windows, no rugs on the floor, no decorative touches of any kind. It was a bachelor's home, purely functional. Reagan spent the morning cleaning, not because it needed it, but because she needed something to do. She swept the floors, wiped down the shelves, reorganized the larder in a way that made more sense to her. She found fabric in her trunk and began measuring the windows for curtains. It was mindless work, but it made her feel useful. Nathan came in at midday for dinner, which Reagan had prepared from the supplies on hand. Just beans and cornbread, but she had made it well, and Nathan ate with obvious appreciation. "This is good," he said. Better than anything I usually make." "I am glad." Reagan poured him more coffee. "I was thinking I might try to plant a garden in the spring. If there is space and you think it would be worthwhile, that would be fine, more than fine. Fresh vegetables would be welcome." Nathan hesitated. "Reagan, you do not have to work so hard to prove yourself useful. You have a place here regardless." "I know," she said, though she was not sure she believed it. "But I want to contribute. I want to earn my place." Nathan looked like he wanted to argue but decided against it. "Well, I appreciate it, truly." The days began to settle into a routine. Nathan worked the ranch and Reagan managed the household. She cooked, cleaned, mended his clothes, and began learning about the chickens and the milk cow. Nathan was patient with her inexperience, showing her how to collect eggs without startling the hens, how to milk the cow properly, how to churn butter. In the evenings, they ate together and talked, small conversations that gradually grew longer and more comfortable. Reagan learned that Nathan loved horses, that he had a dry sense of humor, that he read dime novels when he had the time, which was not often. Nathan learned that Reagan had wanted to be a teacher like her father, that she missed the ocean even though she had only seen it twice, that she hummed while she worked without realizing it. 2 weeks passed, then 3. The awkwardness between them eased into something more companionable, though they still maintained careful boundaries. Nathan still slept in the main room, and they did not touch beyond accidental brushes of hands when passing dishes or working side by side. It was early October when Nathan came in from the range with a gash on his arm, blood soaking through his torn sleeve. Reagan gasped when she saw it. "It is nothing," Nathan said quickly. "One of the fence posts broke and caught me. I just need to clean it." "Sit down," Reagan commanded, her voice sharp with worry. She heated water and found clean cloth, pulling a chair over to where Nathan sat at the table. She cut away his sleeve and examined the wound. It was deep but clean, not as bad as it looked with all the blood. "This is going to hurt," she warned, and began cleaning the gash with careful precision. Nathan hissed but did not pull away, watching her bent head as she worked. "You are good at this," he said through gritted teeth. "My mother used to volunteer at the charity hospital. She taught me some basic nursing." Reagan finished cleaning the wound and began bandaging it, her fingers gentle but efficient. "You should be more careful. This could have been much worse." "I will try." There was something in Nathan's voice that made Reagan look up, and she found him watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. For a moment, neither of them moved, her hand still on his arm, his eyes locked on her face. Then Reagan stepped back, breaking the moment. "Keep that clean and dry. I will check it tomorrow." "Yes, madam," Nathan said softly. That night, Reagan lay awake in bed, thinking about the way Nathan had looked at her. Something was shifting between them, something beyond practicality and convenience. She had grown to respect him over these weeks, to appreciate his steadiness and his kindness. But respect was becoming something else, something that made her heart beat faster when he smiled at her, something that made her notice the strength of his hands and the warmth of his voice. She realized with some surprise, beginning to care for him. Perhaps more than care. The thought should have frightened her, but instead it filled her with a cautious hope. The next morning, Nathan was quieter than usual, almost shy. Reagan checked his arm and was pleased to see no signs of infection. Her fingers lingered on his skin perhaps a moment longer than necessary, and she saw Nathan's throat work as he swallowed. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "You are welcome." October deepened into November, and the weather turned colder. Nathan brought in extra firewood and checked the roof for leaks. Reagan made heavier curtains and cooked heartier meals. They worked together to prepare the ranch for winter, and their conversations grew more personal. One evening, as they sat by the fire after supper, Nathan said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you regret it? Marrying me, I mean, coming here?" He was staring into the fire, not looking at her. Reagan considered the question carefully. "No," she said finally. "I do not regret it." "Do you?" "No." Nathan did look at her then, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "Not for a moment. I know this is not what you planned, but I am glad you are here, Reagan. This place feels different with you in it. Better." Her heart swelled. "It feels better to me too, like home." "Is it?" Nathan asked quietly. "Home, I mean." "Yes," Reagan said, and realized it was true. Somewhere in the past 6 weeks, this small ranch house had become home, and Nathan had become more than just a stranger she had married out of desperation. He smiled, and it transformed his usually serious face. "Good. I am glad." They sat in comfortable silence after that, but Reagan was acutely aware of Nathan's presence, of the way the firelight played across his features, of the desire building inside her to close the distance between them. A few days later, a storm rolled in, bringing rain and wind that battered the house. Reagan was in the kitchen preparing supper when a particularly violent gust rattled the windows. She jumped, and Nathan, who had been repairing a bridle at the table, looked up. "It has just whined," he said. "The house is solid. I know, I am just not used to it. Storms sound different out here." Reagan returned to cutting vegetables, but another gust made her flinch again. Nathan set aside his work and crossed to her. "Hey," he said softly, "it is all right, we are safe." Reagan looked up at him, at his kind eyes and solid presence, and something inside her loosened. "Nathan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I do not want you to sleep out here anymore. I want—" She hesitated, feeling her face heat. "I want this to be a real marriage, if you want that too." Nathan's eyes widened, and for a moment he just stared at her. Then he reached out and gently cupped her face in his hand. "Reagan, I have wanted that since the day I married you, but I did not want to push. I wanted you to be sure." "I am sure," Reagan said, leaning into his touch. "I care for you, Nathan, more than I expected to, more than I thought possible in such a short time." "I care for you too," Nathan said, his voice rough with emotion. "So much it scares me sometimes." He leaned down and kissed her, gentle at first, then deeper as Reagan wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back. It felt right, felt like something she had been waiting for without knowing it. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. "Are you sure?" Nathan asked again, searching her face. "I am sure," Reagan repeated. That night Nathan did not sleep in the main room. They lay together in the narrow bed, wrapped in each other's arms, talking softly until exhaustion overtook them. Nathan told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to expand the herd, about maybe adding sheep or goats. Reagan told him about missing her parents, but feeling like she had found something new here, something that was hers in a way nothing had been before. "I never thought I would be a rancher's wife," Reagan admitted, her head resting on Nathan's chest. "Are you disappointed?" Nathan asked, his hand stroking her hair. "Not even a little," Reagan said. "I would not change it for anything." The winter was hard but beautiful. Snow blanketed the prairie, and the work became more difficult. Nathan spent long hours tending the cattle, making sure they had feed and breaking ice on the water troughs. Reagan kept the house warm and made sure Nathan had hot food and dry clothes when he came in from the cold. They grew closer through the challenges, learning to rely on each other, learning the contours of partnership and love. For Christmas, Nathan surprised her with a rocking chair he had been secretly building in the barn. Reagan cried when she saw it, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. She gave him a shirt she had sewn, embroidered with his initials, and Nathan wore it like it was made of gold. They celebrated quietly, just the two of them, but it was the best Christmas Reagan could remember. They cooked a special meal, sang carols, and sat by the fire talking about the future. "I want to build you a bigger house," Nathan said, holding her hand. "You deserve more than 2 rooms." "I do not need a bigger house," Reagan replied. "I just need you." But she saw the determination in his eyes and knew he would try anyway, because that was who Nathan was. He always tried to give her more than she asked for. The new year brought a thaw, and with it, hope for spring. Reagan realized with some surprise that she had been at the ranch for 4 months. It felt both longer and shorter than that, time stretching and compressing in strange ways. She had arrived a desperate stranger and had become a wife, a partner, a woman with purpose and place. In late January, Reagan began to suspect she might be pregnant. Her courses were late, and she felt tired in a way that was different from ordinary exhaustion. She said nothing to Nathan at first, not wanting to worry him if she was wrong. But as the weeks passed and the signs became more certain, she knew she had to tell him. She chose a Sunday afternoon when the work was lighter. They were sitting together on the porch, enjoying the unseasonably warm weather when Reagan said, "Nathan, I have news." He looked at her, curious. "Good news or bad news?" "Good news," Reagan said, smiling. "At least, I hope you will think so. I believe I am with child." Nathan's expression went through several rapid changes, shock to joy to wonder. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be without a doctor's confirmation. But yes, I am sure." Nathan let out a whoop and swept her into his arms, spinning her around despite her laughing protests. When he set her down, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby." "We are," Reagan confirmed and felt her own tears start to fall. Happy tears this time, so different from the ones she had shed on that train platform months ago. Nathan's hand went to her still flat stomach, his expression reverent. "I am going to be a father, and I a mother." Reagan covered his hand with hers. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not begin to cover it," Nathan said. He kissed her, soft and sweet. "You have given me everything, Reagan. A home, a purpose, and now a child. I do not know what I did to deserve you, but I am grateful every day." "I am grateful too," Reagan said, "for everything, even for Thomas Whitmore's rejection because it led me to you." Nathan laughed. "I should probably send that man a thank you letter." "Please do not," Reagan said, though she was smiling. The pregnancy progressed well, though Reagan had some difficult mornings early on. Nathan was attentive to the point of being overbearing, trying to stop her from doing any work at all until Reagan firmly told him that she was pregnant, not an invalid. They compromised, with Reagan doing lighter tasks and Nathan taking on more of the household work when he could. In March, they made a trip to Julesburg to see the doctor and purchase supplies. The doctor confirmed the pregnancy and said Reagan was healthy and the baby should arrive in late summer. On their way out of town, they passed the train station and Reagan paused, looking at the platform where her life had changed. "You ever think about what would have happened if I had not been there that day?" Nathan asked, following her gaze. "I try not to," Reagan admitted. "But sometimes I do. I think I would have found a way to survive, but I would not have found us." Nathan took her hand. "I was so nervous approaching you, I almost did not do it. I thought you would tell me to go to hell, that it was too presumptuous." "What made you do it anyway?" "You looked so lost," Nathan said quietly, "but also so determined not to show it. I admired that. And I thought, here is a woman who has traveled across the country on faith. That takes courage. I wanted to know someone with that kind of courage." Reagan squeezed his hand. "I am glad you did." They drove back to the ranch with a wagon full of supplies, including fabric for baby clothes and a cradle kit that Nathan planned to assemble. Reagan spent the spring and early summer preparing for the baby, sewing tiny gowns and knitting blankets. Nathan worked on the cradle in the evenings, his large hands surprisingly deft with the delicate work. "What do you hope for?" Reagan asked one night as she watched him sand the wood smooth. "A boy or a girl, healthy," Nathan said immediately. "That is all I care about. But if I had to choose, maybe a boy, someone to help with the ranch when he is older." "I would not mind a girl," Reagan said. "A daughter." "Then let us hope for healthy, and whatever else will be a blessing," Nathan said, smiling at her. But when the baby came in late August, it was indeed a boy, arriving after a long and difficult labor that left Reagan exhausted but triumphant. Nathan paced outside with the doctor they had brought from town, and when he finally heard the baby's cry, he burst into the room looking terrified and awed in equal measure. "A son," the doctor said, handing Nathan the bundled baby while he tended to Reagan. "Congratulations." Nathan stared down at the tiny, red-faced infant in his arms, and Reagan watched her husband fall completely in love. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered. "Reagan, look at him. He is perfect." "Let me see him," Reagan said, exhausted but needing to hold her child. Nathan brought the baby to her, placing him carefully in her arms. Reagan looked down at her son, at his tiny fingers and shock of dark hair, and felt her heart expand in a way she had not known was possible. "What should we name him?" Nathan asked, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. They had discussed names but never settled on anything definite. Reagan looked at her son, then at her husband, and said, "What about Noah? It means peace and rest." Nathan smiled. "Noah Irving, I like it. Welcome to the world, Noah." The baby screwed up his face and let out a wail, and both parents laughed, exhausted and deliriously happy. The first months with Noah were challenging. He was colicky and did not sleep well, which meant Reagan and Nathan did not sleep well either. But they worked together, taking turns walking the floor with their fussing son, supporting each other through the exhaustion. Nathan proved to be a devoted father, always willing to help, never complaining about the disruption to his routine. "I never knew I could love someone this much," Nathan said one night, holding Noah against his shoulder. "Except for you, of course." "Of course," Reagan said, smiling despite her tiredness. "I feel the same way. It is overwhelming sometimes how much you can love." As Noah grew and became less fussy, life settled back into a rhythm. Reagan managed the household and cared for their son while Nathan worked the ranch. But now their evenings were filled with baby sounds, with Noah's gurgles and cries and eventually his laughter. The house that had seemed too small for two adults now felt perfectly sized for their little family. In the spring, when Noah was 8 months old, Nathan began building the addition to the house he had promised. With help from neighboring ranchers, he added 2 more rooms, a proper bedroom for him and Reagan and a nursery for Noah. Reagan decorated both with care, using curtains she made and furniture Nathan built. The house was no longer a bachelor's sparse dwelling but a real home, warm and lived in. "You did all this for us," Reagan said, standing in the new bedroom and looking around with wonder. "I would do anything for you," Nathan replied, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Both of you. You are my whole world, Reagan." She turned in his arms and kissed him. "And you are mine." That summer, they received an unexpected letter. It was from Thomas Whitmore's widow, the woman he had married instead of Reagan. She wrote that Thomas had died in a riding accident that spring, and in settling his affairs, she had come across the correspondence with Reagan. She wanted to apologize for her late husband's behavior and to make amends. Enclosed with the letter was a bank draft for $200, the amount Thomas should have sent for Reagan's return fare. Reagan stared at the letter, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. Anger at Thomas for his callousness, pity for his widow, relief that she had dodged that fate. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, reading over her shoulder. "I am thinking that I am very, very glad I married you instead," Reagan said. She folded the letter and set it aside. "And I am thinking that $200 will go a long way toward expanding the herd." Nathan laughed and kissed the top of her head. "Always practical." "I learned from the best," Reagan replied. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and work, of challenges met and overcome. Noah grew from a baby into a sturdy toddler, then into a curious child who followed Nathan everywhere, wanting to help with the ranch work. Reagan gave birth to a daughter when Noah was 3, a red-faced, screaming bundle they named Rose after Reagan's mother. Then another son 2 years after that, Samuel, who was quiet and thoughtful from birth. The ranch prospered under Nathan's care and Reagan's management. They expanded the herd, added sheep, planted the garden Reagan had dreamed of. They built a larger barn and added onto the house again. Neighboring ranchers became friends, and the Irving Ranch became known as a place of hospitality and good business. Reagan sometimes thought about that day at the train station, about how close she had come to disaster. She thought about the desperation that had driven her west, about Thomas Whitmore's rejection, about Nathan's unexpected intervention. It all seemed like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to a different person. In a way, it had. She was not the same frightened, desperate woman who had stood on that platform with nowhere to go. She was Reagan Irving, rancher's wife, mother of 3, a woman who had built a life from nothing, a woman who had found love in the most unlikely of circumstances. One evening in late September, almost 10 years to the day after they had met, Reagan and Nathan sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Noah, now 9, was teaching Rose to rope fence posts. Samuel, at 4, was more interested in the barn cats. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, and the air smelled of approaching autumn. "Do you remember this day 10 years ago?" Reagan asked, leaning against Nathan's shoulder. "Of course I do. I married the most beautiful woman I had ever seen, terrified she would realize I was not good enough for her." Nathan's arm tightened around her. "Best day of my life." "Mine too," Reagan said, "though I was too scared to realize it at the time." "Were you really that frightened?" "Terrified," Reagan admitted. "You were a stranger offering me a life I knew nothing about, but you were also kind and honest, and you gave me a choice when I had none. That meant everything." Nathan was quiet for a moment, then said, "I did not tell you this at the time, but I was desperate too. Not in the same way, but desperate nonetheless. This ranch was everything I had worked for, but it was lonely. I wanted a partner, a family, a reason beyond just survival. I saw you on that platform and I thought, maybe this is my chance. Maybe we can save each other." "We did," Reagan said softly. "We saved each other." Nathan turned to look at her and Reagan saw the depth of emotion in his eyes. "I love you, Reagan Irving, more than I did 10 years ago, which I would not have thought possible." "I love you too," Reagan replied. "Thank you for taking that letter, for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for saying yes," Nathan said, and kissed her as the sun sank below the horizon and their children's laughter filled the air. The years continued to pass, bringing both joy and sorrow. Reagan's garden flourished, and she became known in Julesburg for her vegetables and preserves, which she sold to the general store. Nathan's herd grew until he was one of the most successful ranchers in the area, respected for his fair dealing and hard work. Their children grew strong and capable, learning the work of the ranch from both parents. There were difficult times too. A drought one summer that killed half the herd. A winter so brutal they nearly lost everything. The death of Nathan's mother, who had remarried but never reconciled with her son before she passed. Reagan's bouts of illness that frightened them both until the doctor assured them it was nothing serious. But through it all, Nathan and Reagan faced everything together. Their love, which had started as a practical arrangement between strangers, had deepened into something unshakable. They knew each other's moods and thoughts, could communicate with a glance, supported each other through every trial. When Noah turned 18, he announced his intention to start his own ranch on adjacent land Nathan had quietly purchased for that purpose. Reagan cried, proud and sad in equal measure, watching her firstborn prepare to make his own way. Rose, at 15, declared she wanted to go to teachers' college in Denver, following in her grandfather's footsteps. Samuel, at 13, was the one most interested in staying and working the family ranch. "They are all leaving or wanting to," Reagan said one night, lying in Nathan's arms. "When did they grow up?" "Gradually, then all at once," Nathan replied. "But they are good children, Reagan. We raised them well. And they are not going far. We will still see them." "I know. It is just strange to think of the house being quieter. It has been so full for so long." Nathan kissed her forehead. "We will adjust, and maybe the quiet will be nice. Give us time to remember what it was like when it was just us." Reagan smiled. "I remember. We were so awkward around each other. You were terrified of me." "I was not terrified of you," Reagan protested. "I was terrified of the situation." "Fair enough." Nathan's hand stroked her hair, a familiar, comforting gesture. "I was terrified too, you know, afraid I had made a terrible mistake, that you would hate ranch life, that I would disappoint you." "You never disappointed me," Reagan said firmly. "Not once in all these years. You are biased. I am honest." She rose up on one elbow to look at him. "Nathan Irving, you are the best man I have ever known. You gave me a home when I had none, loved me when I was unlovable, built a life with me that exceeded every dream I ever had. Our children are blessed to have you as a father, and I am blessed to have you as a husband." Nathan's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Reagan Lambert Irving, you came into my life like a miracle I did not know I was waiting for. You made a house into a home, turned a lonely rancher into a husband and father, gave me purpose beyond just surviving. I would live these years over again 1,000 times if it meant ending up right here with you." They kissed, long and tender, a reaffirmation of vows spoken decades ago and kept faithfully ever since. The children did leave, though not all at once or permanently. Noah built his ranch and married a girl from town, bringing her to family dinners every Sunday. Rose went to Denver for school but came home every summer and eventually returned permanently to teach at the Julesburg school. Samuel stayed and worked alongside Nathan, learning everything his father could teach him about ranching and land management. Grandchildren arrived, first from Noah, then from Rose after she married a lawyer from Denver. The house that Reagan had worried would be too quiet filled again with young voices, with babies and toddlers who called Nathan and Reagan grandpa and grandma. Nathan proved to be as devoted a grandfather as he had been a father, always willing to play, to teach, to comfort scraped knees and hurt feelings. Reagan watched him with their grandchildren and fell in love with him all over again. This man who had taken a chance on a desperate stranger at a train station, who had built a life with her through hard work and devotion, who loved with his whole heart. She could not imagine her life without him, could not remember what it had felt like to be alone and afraid. On their 20th anniversary, Nathan surprised her with a trip to Denver. They stayed in a hotel, ate at restaurants, went to the theater, things they had never done together. It was wonderful, but Reagan found herself eager to return home to the ranch, to their familiar life. "I love the city," she told Nathan as they boarded the train back to Julesburg, "but I love our home more." "Me too," Nathan agreed, "though it has been nice to have you all to myself for a few days." Reagan laughed. "We have each other every night." "True, but there are usually children or grandchildren interrupting. This has been peaceful." They returned to find that Noah and Samuel had managed everything perfectly in their absence, and Rose had kept the grandchildren entertained. Life resumed its comfortable rhythm. More years passed. Reagan's hair turned gray, and Nathan's became more salt than pepper. Their hands became rough with decades of work, their faces lined with years of sun and laughter. Their children raised families of their own, and the Irving name became well established in the territory. When Colorado achieved statehood in 1876, the year Reagan and Nathan had married, they attended the celebration in Denver with all three children. When the railroad expanded through the area, bringing more settlers and commerce, they adapted, finding new markets for their cattle and produce. When hard times came, as they inevitably did in ranching, they weathered them together, their bond strengthened by years of partnership. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren threw them a party that filled the ranch house and spilled out into the yard. Friends and neighbors came from miles around to celebrate the couple who had become a fixture of the community, known for their hospitality, fairness, and obvious devotion to each other. 30 years, Reagan said, standing beside Nathan as they surveyed the celebration. "Can you believe it?" "Some days it feels like yesterday," Nathan replied. "Other days, I cannot remember life before you." "I cannot remember wanting life before you," Reagan said. "Everything good in my life started the day you offered to take that letter." Nathan pulled her close, unmindful of their audience. "Best decision I ever made." "Second best," Reagan corrected. "The best was following through and actually marrying me." Nathan laughed, the sound rich and warm. "You might be right about that." They danced together as the sun set, surrounded by the family and life they had built, by the love that had grown from the most unlikely of beginnings. Reagan rested her head on Nathan's shoulder and closed her eyes, memorizing this moment, this feeling of complete contentment. The years continued their inexorable march. Reagan and Nathan eventually turned the running of the ranch over to Samuel, though they remained active and involved. They spent more time with their grandchildren, teaching them to garden and rope and ride. They took walks in the evening, hand in hand, watching the sun set over land they had worked for decades. Reagan sometimes thought about writing her story, about the journey from Philadelphia to Colorado, from desperation to contentment, from stranger to soulmate. But she never quite got around to it, too busy living the life to document it. Maybe that was better. Some stories were meant to be lived rather than told. When they had been married 35 years, Nathan fell ill with pneumonia. Reagan nursed him through it, just as she had nursed him through injuries and ailments over the decades. He recovered, but more slowly than he once would have, and Reagan saw the shadow of mortality for the first time. It frightened her, the thought of losing him, of being without her partner after so many years together. "I am not going anywhere yet," Nathan told her, seeming to read her thoughts. "We still have years ahead of us, Reagan. Promise?" Reagan asked, hating how her voice trembled. "I promise," Nathan said, pulling her into his arms. "I am too stubborn to leave you." He kept that promise for another 15 years. They celebrated their 50th anniversary surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, a dynasty built on love and hard work. Nathan made a speech, his voice strong despite his 76 years, about how Reagan had been the greatest blessing of his life, how their accidental meeting had been the hand of Providence. "I saw a woman who needed help," Nathan said, looking at Reagan with eyes still full of love. "But what I got was a partner, a best friend, a mother to my children and the love of my life. Reagan Irving, you are everything to me. You always have been from that first day. I love you more than words can express." Reagan cried, something she seemed to do more easily in her old age, and stood to embrace her husband. "And I love you, Nathan Irving. Thank you for taking a chance on me. Thank you for every day of these 50 years." The party lasted long into the night, filled with laughter and music and stories. Reagan and Nathan sat together, watching their legacy play out before them, and felt the deep satisfaction of a life well lived. Nathan passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, at the age of 78. Reagan woke to find him cold beside her, his face peaceful, his hand still holding hers. The grief was overwhelming, a tidal wave that threatened to pull her under. 52 years of marriage, of partnership, of love, ended in a single night. The funeral brought the entire community out. Nathan had been respected and loved, and the church could not hold all who came to pay their respects. Reagan sat in the front pew, flanked by her children, and listened to the minister speak about Nathan's life, his character, his devotion to family and community. But what Reagan thought about was that day at the train station. The way Nathan had approached her, hat in hand, offering salvation when she had nowhere else to turn. The way he had kept every promise he made, had loved her with steadiness and strength, had built a life with her that exceeded anything she could have imagined. "I will take that letter," he had said, and in doing so had taken her heart as well. After the funeral, after the visitors left and the casseroles were eaten and life resumed its march, Reagan found herself alone in the house she and Nathan had built together. It was too quiet without him, too empty. She moved through the rooms like a ghost, touching things he had touched, remembering. But she was not entirely alone. Her children visited daily, bringing the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Samuel and his wife invited her to stay with them, but Reagan refused. This was her home. Nathan was in every board and nail, in the expansions and improvements, in the memories soaked into the very walls. She would not leave it. Spring came, and Reagan planted her garden as she had every year. Her hands were gnarled with arthritis now, and the work was harder, but she persisted. Noah and Samuel helped with the heavy work, but Reagan did the planting herself, settling each seed into the soil with care. As she worked, she talked to Nathan, told him about the grandchildren's accomplishments, about the ranch news, about her plans for the garden. It made her feel less alone, imagining him listening, imagining his responses. One warm afternoon in May, Reagan sat on the porch in the rocking chair Nathan had built her 50 years earlier. She was watching the road, though she expected no one, when a familiar feeling washed over her. A presence, warm and comforting, like strong arms wrapping around her shoulders. "Nathan," she whispered, and felt peace settle over her like a blanket. She understood then that he was not truly gone. He was in the land they had worked, in the children they had raised, in the love they had built together. He was in every sunset she watched, every garden she planted, every story she told the great-grandchildren. Their love had started with a letter refused and a stranger's kindness. It had grown through hard work and shared dreams, through challenges met and joys celebrated. It had created a legacy that would outlive them both, a testament to what could be built when two people chose each other, day after day, year after year. Reagan lived another 5 years, remaining active and involved until the very end. She passed away at 83 in her sleep, in the bed she had shared with Nathan. Her children found her with a smile on her face, one hand stretched out as though reaching for someone. They buried her beside Nathan, under a cottonwood tree on a hill overlooking the ranch. The headstone read, "Reagan Lambert Irving, beloved wife, mother, grandmother." And beneath that, the words she had requested. She said yes. The ranch stayed in the Irving family, passed down through Samuel to his children and grandchildren. The house was eventually expanded again, modernized over the decades, but the original 2 rooms Nathan had built remained, preserved as a testament to where it all began. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the sun sets over the Colorado prairie, visitors to the ranch swear they can see 2 figures on the porch, an old man and an old woman, sitting together in a rocking chair, watching the land they loved, holding hands as they had in life, together still in whatever comes after. The story of Nathan and Reagan became family legend, told to each new generation. The tale of how they met, how a rejected mail-order bride found love with a cowboy at a train station who simply said, "I will take that letter." How that single moment of kindness and courage had blossomed into a love story for the ages, a partnership that built not just a ranch but a dynasty, not just a marriage but a legacy. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest loves begin with the smallest acts of faith. A woman brave enough to say yes to a stranger. A man brave enough to offer a choice when none existed. And the decision to choose each other every day, through good times and bad, through all the seasons of a life shared. Their love story proved that destiny is not always neat, that sometimes the wrong path leads to the right destination, that rejection can be redirection, and that the greatest adventures often begin with the simplest words, "I will take that letter." And 52 years later, Reagan Lambert's answer remained the same. Yes.